morning, listeners. My name is Micha.
And my name is Christian.
And my name is Josiah. Welcome to the Morning Ponderings podcast.
This is a podcast where now three of us, sometimes two of us, get to sit down and just have a conversation about some very deep things of life and try to flesh out how this could impact the way that we live.
Our goal is to unlock the freedom to be wrong and explore the possibilities so that empathy for others can flourish.
Nice.
That was a good one.
That was a good one.
Good morning,
Yeah.
everybody.
Good morning.
Josiah,
Good
I've
morning.
never, actually, not in person still, but this is our official meeting.
Yeah, it
How's
is.
it going?
I stitched one of your videos a few weeks ago, and that's the only time we've interacted.
Wait, what, really? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I
I
did.
need
Wait,
to
you
go
did
back
that?
in my records now. I must
it
not
was
have known it was you.
It was the one where you were asking about the godless miracle stories,
Oh!
and I was talking about the writing thing, because I was thinking about, how, the thing is always you can only become better through Jesus or whatever, and I just was like, I don't know what that means. I'm going to do something that I think will help me.
There you go. And I recognize your hair, so now I know.
Well, it's a slightly different color now, but it's kind of getting lighter. It was like a fuchsia. Back then it was like rose gold. Now it's like purple-ish. But
Yeah.
yeah, the colorful hair.
I guess we should just say Josiah has been invited to be a regular part of this show. And this podcast, whatever we're going to call it. It could be called a show. And so luckily, with the stars aligning and really our schedules, which is really difficult, we're up at a crisp, 6 a.m. for us, 7 a.m. for Christian,
Yeah,
recording
I have
this.
the time zone advantage.
Yeah. But
I'm used to waking up at 5 a.m. normally, so
it's nothing for him.
it's not too bad.
So it's only really a struggle for Micha.
Well, yeah, because I work at night, so yeah. Anyway,
Oh, man.
how is
Well,
your
speaking of that, real quick, I learned that Micha is a 5-alarm person. I'm a 3-alarm person this morning. So, Josiah, how many alarms does it take to get you up this early?
Just one.
Oh my goodness.
But how many do you set?
We are not
I said
worthy.
one.
Wow. Okay,
Listen,
don't.
All right, well,
you don't have to flex.
I'm
on us
not, I'm not worthy
like
to
that.
be a part of this.
No,
I'm gonna-
I started during college. I went to College of the Ozarks, where you have to work 15 hours a week on campus, and then you don't have to pay tuition, which honestly is pretty nice. And so my first semester I had a night job, and then the second semester I had to get up at 5:30 to go to work. And so I just had to train myself to go to sleep at 9 and wake up at 5 and just be okay with that. And my alarm would hit and I would just pop out of bed and go. I'm not like that anymore because I'm older now. I'm 25, so I'm not an old man, but
Yeah.
I'm losing energy.
Yeah,
that
older.
I used to have that energy, but I still I get up after the alarm and I normally open up my phone, hit myself with that blue light, and I'm like, all right, now I can't go back to sleep.
Right.
It's so weird being the oldest person in the room. I'm not used to that. I don't know. I was hoping you would be older than me, Josiah, but it is not the case. I beat you by a year.
That's funny. This is funny, and I'm
With a
There was
year
a time-
difference, I consider us the same age.
I mean, I'm
Time is
used
just
to
a social construct.
I'm used to looking the youngest and being the youngest in the room, and that is still true. So
I will never forget this time I was working under my dad at the university local here, and I was in my cubicle, and there was another guy who was in another cubicle, and he had this full beard and just seemed like he was so put together, and he was in a little bit of a higher position. And I was like, I always in my mind I assumed that he was older than me. Come to find out later, he's actually younger than me. And I was just like, why is everybody younger than me? What is going on?
something about facial hair just adds 5 years to your life.
I guess.
Yeah.
Or to your
I
appearance.
also I wore a suit when I worked at the restaurant because I was promoted to restaurant supervisor when I was almost about to turn 24. Um, and so I was one of the youngest people at the restaurant. I think there was one person younger than me. But I wore a suit, and people thought I was in my mid to late 30s. So
Nice.
So
gave me a
professional
little
looking.
air of authority.
Yeah, yeah.
There you go. So, Micah, I hear you had a crazy week.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I did. So we are finally on contract with the house, and it's super, super exciting. We're still cautiously hopeful because it could still fall through, but like it's a lot less likely now. We got through the inspection a couple days ago, and it actually went really well. There's like a couple kind of major problems, but only one of them is like immediate. The sewer might potentially back up like in the next few months, who knows. And so that's something we need to get fixed, and so we
Oh,
need
for
to
sure.
see how much that'll cost. But other than that, like we're super excited, and we're actually starting to get our hopes up that like we're gonna have a house by the end of October, which is
Yeah,
just
man, that's
insane.
super exciting.
Yeah, but with that, obviously, like getting a house is a lot of work, a lot of papers to sign and decisions to make on like, well, how much are you gonna put down? And oh, geez, it's so many papers. I did not
Mm.
know. You both of you have houses, so you guys both know. But like,
I think I can partially relate just because I bought my house off my parents. And so
ah,
there was a lot that was streamlined for that process, and they absorbed somewhat the down payments,
yeah,
such that we're now just kind of paying them back for the down payment over time without interest.
mm,
So
yeah, that's nice.
mm, that was very convenient. How was your house purchasing process, Josiah?
Honestly, I wish I could do it again. Looking at houses is so fun. Um,
Now the
I
miss
don't know. It
market.
wasn't too difficult. Well, yeah, I got my house like 3 years ago almost now. It was around Thanksgiving.
Same.
Also, my house is pretty cheap. Like nobody be jealous of me for having a house. It's but yeah, I don't know. I mean, my agent was super cool. She kind of did a ton of stuff with us. The guy that we bought the house from tried to drop the price and then have us pay for things that needed to be fixed, like the water heater had a flue that was running too close to
Mm.
a beam, like a wooden beam, and so it was like, hey, that's a fire hazard. You can't sell a house like that. And he was like, oh, well, we'll drop the price if you pay to fix that. And we are like, no, we'll keep the price, and you can put in a new water heater.
Mm.
Nice.
And like just a couple of things like that. She kind of helped us negotiate those things, and she was basically like, yeah, you kind of have him here because he can't sell the house without fixing these things. So now I have like a nice electric water heater that I didn't pay for.
That's
So that's
awesome.
pretty cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, so the house we're staying in right now, she just replaced her water heater and instead got a tankless water heater, which I had never heard of before.
Oh yeah, I kind of want one of those.
It's
Isn't that
pretty
like
cool.
infinite hot water?
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
And apparently it saves you money over
love that
time. Like
someday.
it costs a lot up front, but it saves you money over time and they last longer, which is pretty cool. And it saves you space in your basement because you don't have a physical water heater. You just have this thing, like it's like a big box on the wall that it's cool.
I want to save up money for one of those one day. That'd just be so awesome. I like
Yeah.
long showers. My wife gets annoyed by it, and maybe she'll protest because at least there's a time limit when it's just a tank.
That's
But
fair. Yeah. Oh, other big news for me this week is I quit my other job, the cabinet place.
hey,
I quit it.
and you're done with it now, right?
I'm done. Yeah. This is going to be my first week without it. And even more exciting news, literally yesterday I walked into Costco, which is where I work if people didn't know that. And they said until January 2nd, anybody who's part-time can do temporary full-time. And so I'm getting full-time hours now, which is like incredible. And that'll
That
at
is
least,
awesome.
yeah, that'll at least get me through the next like 3 months. And then hopefully there will be a position open that I can apply for, or at least prove to them that like, hey, I want to work here and I want to have full-time hours and I kind of need it. So yeah, that's really exciting because just working 2 jobs, especially on the same day, is incredibly exhausting, and I'm glad to be done doing that.
Oh yeah. I've never had to work 2 jobs, but in the jobs I have worked, I couldn't imagine having to do that. I
Only
worked
by
for
necessity.
Yep. I worked retail once, and I was at Hobby Lobby, and I made the mistake of signing up and checking the box saying full availability,
Yeah.
and I had no idea that just meant I had no autonomy over what hours I worked and what hours I didn't. It was fully up to the employer.
Yeah.
And how much I worked. So that was a mistake. If you're listening and you're thinking about applying to a retail job, you might want to be more specific about your hours so you can have some freedom with your life.
But also know that if you're at a place like Costco and you're on the bottom of the totem pole, you don't actually have much control anyway
That's
until
true.
you've been there. Until you've been there a while.
Sounds like we need to overthrow the bourgeois, boys.
There might be a very little amount of freedom that you can grab, but grab it while you can.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say, Josiah? We were
I said it sounds like we need to overthrow the bourgeois.
Oh my gosh.
You know me, I have to do at least one per conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Now remind me, because I remember hearing about this when I was listening to the raw footage of the of the episode you were in. Are you the? I will be honest. I am an uncultured swine. I do not know the extreme differences between communism and socialism, and I forget which one you are the arbiter of, or both.
Well, as long as you're not a bourgeois swine, it's fine. Just kidding. Anyway, I usually refer to myself as a socialist because it's a softer word. There's not really a difference. Like, people normally associate communism with the authoritarian style of government, which is something that I do not subscribe to. I'm more of a, like, we should have a society with no hierarchy eventually, and take steps to getting to a place where we don't have people that effectively or literally own other people, like Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. All work is cooperative with like the employees actually own the business and vote on things. So basically you have like a democracy in your workplace.
And you make enough
like
to live.
You don't have the means of living attached to commodity, so you don't have to like pay for things that you would need to live, so that everybody can just live
And work if they want. Honestly,
that one
even
scares a lot of people because they're like, nobody will work. Like, I don't know. I think everybody will, but also I don't really care. I just want people to live, I guess.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of deconstructing. One way that I've made a major shift in my life is I went from very socially conservative to very socially liberal. Like, I am very socially liberal now. And I think socially, what is it? Fiscal? Or not socially fiscal, but fiscally, I was very, very fiscally conservative, but now that's kind of up in the air, and I'm questioning everything. So I've been doing a lot of thinking and deconstructing of that. And one of the thoughts that crossed my mind recently is like, okay, people like to talk a whole lot about like what is a right versus a privilege. And I was thinking, like, the thought crossed my mind recently, well, when I'm at my home and I have my kids in my home, what things do I dictate as being a right for them versus a privilege? If my son comes up to me and he has a scrape in his knee, is my providing a Band-Aid and medical care to him a right of his and a responsibility of me as a father? Or is that a privilege? And there's no situation that I would deny my son medical attention if he came to me with that. Like, I would spare no expense. And same goes for like a whole lot of things, like food, for example, and shelter and clothing and dignity and all of those things. Like, none of those things my son has to work for. None of those things my son has to earn. And so it really made me like reflect upon the conservative dogma that I've been fed and taught my whole life versus of like what is a right versus a privilege, and then how does that reflect upon our society? And it's like, I don't even know anymore. I don't know what the solutions would look like, but in terms of the problem, I have a whole new perspective on that.
I feel like that's a really good way of thinking about it, is like with your children, and like what is just you, honestly, your responsibility as the father to give to them, and their right as the child. That like if you didn't give them food, then like CPS would be coming for you, like, because that's abuse, that's child abuse. But yet in our country, we apparently don't think food is a right, or shelter, that's a privilege. Now, like obviously getting like a nice house would be a privilege, but just having a house I think should be a right. Just
also, everybody should have a train outside their house. We should just have railways that just run throughout the city, and all the trains are electric, so we use less gas. And yeah, everybody just has like a personal train. That's what I say.
Or what if everybody had a electric automated car? Would that accomplish the same purpose but with less railroading?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Unless
I hate like traffic culture, like I don't know. I really like trains and public transport and stuff like that, but I like to take things a little too far sometimes.
We could have personal,
everybody should just have a train.
Personal trolleys. I mean, if we just had like actual like personal sized little like smart cars or something, and then like if you wanted something bigger, then you could buy something bigger, but you at least have transportation.
And maybe you can get like an update if you have a child and family.
Yeah.
An upgrade. Something. This is turning into the episode on social issues, but hey, that's not an issue.
Yeah. Well, I could just say, hey, we'll pray for them, and then we roll into the topic there.
Transitions.
Well, there's one other thing that happened this week that's, I don't know, get your guys' thoughts on, and just kind of share a bit about my personal growth and my wife's personal growth. But my wife and I had this really eye-opening conversation the other day, where I really have started to like recognize what exactly it means to have like internalized racism. And what I realized is that in our culture, it's not necessarily race specific, but I feel like disproportionately affects people of color, just in the way it's been set up and designed. But in our society, especially in the United States, there are so many needless systems of superiority. Like, they only exist to fuel people's superiority complexes. Be it the whole concept of, like, profanity. I'm pretty sure that the category of language that is labeled profanity purely exists to fuel the superiority complex of Christians. And accents and proper language and grammar and the way you speak and the way you conduct yourself and what clothes you wear and the way you look, all of these things, there's just so many of them which exist purely to fuel people's superiority complexes. And it's usually built to bolster what it means to be white.
Yeah.
And that's something that I realized is a major issue in the world and all over the place.
Yeah.
And something I need to reflect upon personally. And my wife too, like, we both were having this conversation. We were like, there's a lot of questions that come with that too. Like, and so I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on these questions. At what point does, like, recognizing a difference go from, and maybe like preferring a difference? Like, for example, preferring people who don't curse and use a ton of profanity, like as a romantic partner or something. Like, at what point does that go from just having a preference or recognizing this difference to becoming a superiority complex that needs to be looked at and worked on and changed, possibly? Is it something that can change?
I would say,
Who's going first? Is it you, Micah?
sure. I had some thoughts as he was talking. I mean, I think you're definitely right. Like, there's lots of evidence of that. I mean, even like growing up with the whole, like, saying ain't is like ain't a word. Like, that was like something we said in school all the time. But who are the people who mostly used that? Oh, okay. When you learn that it was African American people. Oh, okay. I see why they say that's not a word, even though we all know what they're saying. And like, to me, language is completely, I mean, it's completely constructed. It's something we use to understand each other. And so, is there wrong language? If you understand what somebody's saying, then is anything actually wrong? And then, as far as like cursing, I understand that that's like a trigger, especially growing up in like a religious environment. But like, I can say from experience, that used to be something that would trigger me. And but eventually, once I started to learn about how, honestly, language is completely arbitrary in the first place, and that some things are curse words in other, like, countries that even speak English but isn't really here, that we just like don't care. I'm like, maybe I need to check out these triggers and see if they actually mean anything. And I found I don't think they do. Now, that doesn't mean that, like, I'm just going to say whatever I want to people, because I recognize that that system is still in place. And so I respect other people who that would be a trigger for, or would, as much as I hate it, just not listen to me because they would hear me say something. And so then they'd be like, all right, I'm ruling him off as somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. So I still have to kind of play into the system, but I don't believe the system. I think those systems completely made up. And so I don't know that, like, so to kind of answer your question, I do think it's something that needs to be examined, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, I never play into the system too, because in society right now, that's not something that I can change and overhaul overnight. And so I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, to an extent. Like, I think you touched on it, and oh, I was going to say something else, but I can't remember at the moment. So, what was your thoughts, Josiah?
Well, I think I definitely see where you're coming from. I actually got disconnected from the idea of language superiority as a conservative, mostly because I'm a contrarian by nature. And so when I would like, I worked at Steak and Shake as my first job, so I just heard a ton of cussing all the time. But a lot of those people were like my friends and people that I liked, and I didn't see them as bad people. They were just people who cussed. So when people said stuff like, I don't even know. It was a long time ago, back in high school. But people would say things about like cuss words or slang or whatever, and I'd just be like, hey, language evolves actually, and people use these words. We don't have to, we didn't get English right at a certain point. Like, if you go back to like the 1100s and try to read their English, you would not be able to understand a single word of it. Those sorts of things. Like, language just continues to evolve. And so I just always saw it as like an evolution of language. And I cuss pretty freely, but I don't tend to in certain areas. Like, I don't intend to on this show, because it's kind of you guys' show and I haven't heard you guys cuss yet. So, but like I have a filter that I use sometimes, but I think like, I don't know. I think like, just if you challenge the idea enough, there's a difference between, you kind of mentioned like a romantic partner there at the end. Like, I think there's a difference between whether or not you like would hire somebody at a job because you heard them cuss like while they were on the phone outside, or maybe even they said like one of the smaller, more common cuss words like around you, and like whether or not you would want somebody who cusses like every sentence in your life. Like, there's the closeness of somebody to you matters. Like, we obviously have higher standards for the people who we keep very close to us than we do for people who are just like in society. So you don't apply Like, just because I think that, like, being gay is okay or whatever, it doesn't mean that I'm going to go marry a man because I'm not attracted to men, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that kind of thing. You can kind of view it like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I
So,
feel like
in
that
that
makes
case,
sense.
it's not really a standard. That's just sexuality. But, yeah, that's kind of the point of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I think there also is sometimes a false assumption that I doubt you have, but maybe subconsciously you have, that like if you deconstruct even just like the idea of cussing and like it just in your mind, then that means you're gonna start cussing all the time. It's not necessarily true. And I think that's a fear that people have, that, you know, like if you've never used it before, then you probably won't again unless you want to, in which case that's totally up to you. And so anyway, I was just thought I had.
Yeah, that's a good
I mean,
point,
I've taken
Micah.
to using occasional profanity, well, a little more than occasional now, whenever I'm in like private.
Yeah.
But like when I'm like, I recognize if I'm like around my family, especially like just in the society and culture that I find myself in, if I were to use profanity super often, they would use that profanity to write off whatever it is I had to say.
Yeah.
And so I tend to veer away from using profanity in any other situation apart from like private ones, because I don't want to be written off so easily. I think that that is something that the people in my life need to work on. I think that that's not necessarily an
Yeah.
excusable behavior, but it's not something that I can really it's one of those things that's going to take a lot of time and friendly conversation to help them deconstruct. I can't just come out and say, well, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird situations that's very common, I feel like, with conversations with family.
Yep. It is. We can all relate.
Yep.
So today our conversation is going to be about prayer, and it's, at first I thought, you know, like maybe there's not going to be a ton to talk about, but now the more I thought about it and like questions I came up with, I was like, this is actually such a huge part of what it meant to be I guess to be religious or to be a Christian, and then leaving that for me, or like just exploring that, you know, like what does that look like now for us? And so my question to start us off is what were you told as a child? Like what did they tell you prayer was? And then how has that developed?
Oh man, prayer has meant a bunch of different things for me over the years. Like, in my immaturity as a child, it definitely felt like a genie in the lamp kind of thing, where you would pray for the things you wanted. And it's, okay, I actually have a cute but really dumb story. So,
Tell it.
as a child, I was super obsessed with like Pokemon. And this just goes to show how genie in the lamp I thought prayer was. So one night, I decided that I was going to pray to God to give me a Pikachu. Like a real world Pokemon Pikachu. And so I made that prayer. And then the following day, what turned out to be like one of the, it felt like at the time, the worst days in my life up to that point. And then I like did some reflecting upon, oh no, what did I do to anger God? And I was like, you know, that was a really selfish prayer. I probably shouldn't have prayed for something so selfish and pointless. Like it really didn't, if I got a Pokemon, I would just benefit me and no one else. And that was super selfish of me. So that was actually a pinnacle moment in my life.
Wow.
That adjusted the way I thought about prayer. So it like went from genie in the lamp kind of prayer to, okay, I'm going to, instead of praying for my selfish purposes and reasons, I'm going to start to pray that God would make his will known to me, and so that I can better try and live in his will and help other people and be more selfless in my prayer. So that's one thing that happens in my journey of understanding prayer, I'm curious, did you guys ever have like that genie in the lamp kind of phase of your prayer understanding?
I think that like the way, even in spaces where it's like told don't use God as a vending machine or a genie in a lamp or whatever, the way that prayer is talked about is still largely that. And so I think it's kind of inevitable that even when I was like, yeah, I shouldn't use prayer like this or whatever, it was like, yeah, I still did.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember specifically a lot of childhood prayers. So I don't know if there was like a phase, but I think it was just like all the time up until, well, I guess I haven't totally stopped praying. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember like a like turning point in, but yeah, like definitely I prayed like that, or it was, it was either asking for something, or it was like, thank you for the food, thank you for this, thank you for that, like just thank thankfulness, I guess. And I also agree with Josiah, like as much as the church says they don't pray like a genie in the lamp, they do quite a bit.
Almost explicitly.
Like I just think of like almost every prayer before a meal. It's like, bless this food. Okay, so it's like some like I don't want to be like offensive, but like to compare it to something else, like putting an enchantment on your food, right? To bless it into your body. And
maybe
then
the disclaimer you're looking for is this is Micah's understanding and interpretation of it. It's totally valid, even if it's not necessarily other people's understanding and interpretation of it.
yeah. And I actually have done some study on why we pray for our food, but now like I haven't done historical studies because I'm curious to know how that developed. But anyway, but even like praying for like give them safe travels, like it's all these things that, or put like a hedge of protection around this person, like all these things that are kind of just asking God to do something for you, or protect you, or like just different things like that. And so still very much was genie in the bottle. But I mean, through development, I did think like, it's more of a conversation, or it should be more of a conversation. And so my prayers definitely developed into much more than that. Yeah, I guess Christian, how did your idea of prayer like develop past then? Like, I guess, what do you even think prayer, like, I mean, do you have like other turning points where like your understanding grew?
Yeah. So where my prayer went from there, I think I touched on this a little bit, but it became like still kind of praying to God for things, but taking a less selfish turn.
Yeah.
Where now it's a selfless, keep them safe, may your will be done, watch over and guide them, make your will known, that kind of stuff. One thing, though, that always bothered me, and I never really dove into I imagine there's probably some explanation for this where maybe this doesn't apply anymore, but it bothered me to this very day. It still bothers me a little bit, but I always thought prayer was, especially because of what the Bible has to say, but like I always thought prayer is supposed to be a private affair. It is not supposed to be a public event. And yet every meal, everybody would pray aloud. Every time people would go on a trip, everybody would gather in a circle and pray aloud. Every time there was the start of some kind of an event, everyone would gather in a circle and pray aloud. It's like, okay, are we being hypocritical here? Like, aren't we supposed to be, like, this just feels like I mean, we're not supposed to pray publicly because it's not supposed to be some kind of a power move, like, I am holier than thou, whoever has the best prayer or whatever, most moving prayer. Even in church, like the pastor would pray aloud, and it's like it always felt a little hypocritical to me, and I never took the time to dive into why it is that we do that. So I'm actually really curious what your guys' thoughts and insights are into the whole idea of prayer as a public affair versus a private one.
Well, I was a minister, so I have many thoughts on that, because I obviously had to dive into that. I think that largely there are many times where prayer becomes a show, and prayer becomes like unintentionally, just because like I mean, the reason, like in a small group or something, they're like, hey, anyone want to pray us out? And nobody wants to. It's because you're all afraid of what other people think, right? Because to some extent, like you hear people's prayers and you're like, oh man, they're closer to God, or they're like, and so even unintentionally in your mind, it kind of is a show, like because you're praying out loud, other people are listening. I think there is, at least like whenever I was obviously leading prayers every single week on the stage, like there is an element of like leading people, like there was some power with leading us all in the same prayer. And that was the goal more so than like, I'm putting on a show for you on stage. It's like, let's all pray the same thing together. Just like, let's all sing the same things together. And that there is some like sense of bringing us all onto the same page and in community with one another. That is different whenever you're on your own. You're just on your own when you're on your own. But whenever you're doing something together, it kind of brings you into community and brings you into like the same mind to, I guess, will for the same things. But I agree, like it too easily becomes a show and listen to my lofty or fancy prayers.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Josiah?
I think like the way that I always explained it to people that I had that question was like, well, when Jesus was criticizing the Pharisees, he was criticizing their kind of showiness, and he was always a little bit hyperbolic in his speech, because Jesus was a based contrarian. Just kidding. That's but he was like criticizing the fact that they used prayer to show how holy they were instead of using it as like a way of like humbling and getting closer to God. Or I figured that we'll talk about the theology of prayer. But I always figure stuff like people can definitely turn it into showiness, and they do all the time. I think when it's something like maybe like a small group prayer, like a healthy way for that to come about is if you are doing it for the benefit of the people around you. Like if you're trying to create an air of peace with the way that you do the prayer. Like I think that there's methods that I've seen Christians use or people from other religions use that make prayer a healthy thing for people around them. And so it kind of depends. Like if you are trying every time you pray to be like holy and appear as if you have things right or whatever, or like even your theology is correct in your prayer or something like that, like it becomes its own sermon. Like that's definitely crossing the line. But I don't know, I guess I mostly just would care, like, are you doing this to benefit the people around you, or is this to show how great you are?
I feel like it's intent and outcome. Like what is your intent, even subconsciously, with how you're praying? And then but not just that, because I think that intent doesn't matter most of the time. Really, the outcome is what matters the most. And so then how do people perceive that? If people perceive you as being very showy, I don't care what your intention is, because everybody's perceiving you a certain way that you need to, maybe change.
And if your intention is not to be showy, then you would probably care whether or not people do see you that way. So like that would be a criticism that you're open to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say just one more thing, kind of a little bit on what prayer is for me today, and then I'm going to have to head out. And then I'll listen to your guys' thoughts on that later when I listen back on it. But you mentioned, Josiah, that there's a whole theology behind prayer, and kind of that dictates the nature of it. And for me, very recently, the way I perceive and understand theology has been shifting and changing a lot. And I'm at that point where, like, I don't know the nature and identity of God and what kind of relationship God wants to have with me, or even if there is a God. Like, I feel like I have certain assurances in my life to warrant the confidence that there might be. And so I hope for that possibility to an extent, and for especially certain understandings of the possibility of God. But if there is a God, they have not given me the information I would need to be at the level of certainty and confidence that I once felt without good reason. It was mostly certainty and confidence because other people around me seemed so certain and confident, and I assumed they had a good reason to. And then I had those conversations and I found out they didn't. But anyways, so now I'm in this place where prayer is an acknowledgement of the hope I have for the possibility of God. And it doesn't really have any specific rules attached to it. It doesn't have any specific kind of structure that it needs to abide to, because God hasn't given me the information I would need, so far as I'm aware, to formulate what prayer is. And so now, if something happens in my life and it feels like maybe there's some kind of intentionality behind it on behalf of a greater power, I might pray a prayer of thankfulness to whomever it is that might be God, who's working possibly in my life. Maybe God has nothing to do with the thing that happened, but I might still be thankful. And other times there might be a really difficult task ahead of me, or something else, some kind of trial or obstacle that lies ahead, and I might pray to the hope I have for a benevolent God for strength and courage and the motivation to push through. So prayer for me now has become this very, just pretty much that acknowledgement. And I'm still figuring out exactly what it is, what place it has in my life, and what form it's supposed to take. So I'm very curious about your guys' thoughts pertaining to how do we interpret and use prayer outside of the Christian context. But before you dive into that, I'll have to listen to your answers later because it is 8:03 in my time zone. So I gotta head out. You guys who are listening, you should totally subscribe, leave a review. You can find me at TikTok on Truth Voyager. You can find a support link in the description of this video. I gotta go.
All right.
And I look forward
later,
to
Christian.
listening to the rest of the conversation between Micha and Josiah. It was nice meeting you, Josiah.
Nice meeting you too.
All right. See you, Christian. All right. So we are gonna keep going. So don't leave the podcast. No, I don't know how I'm gonna cut this up, but
do you want to talk about how prayer inherently leads to harm, or
oh my gosh,
or no? Are we not going that far?
We'll see how far we can go. Inherently?
Yeah,
Wow.
Well, not inherent. I don't want to say inherently. I would say more like, so I did look into how other cultures use prayer.
Okay.
I specifically watched like a Muslim prayer and a Buddhist prayer, and they have kind of different ways of doing it, but both of them I think are better than the way that Christians do it in America. I have talked to I know a little bit about Islam. I let somebody try to convert me once. I was like,
Nice.
He was like, hey, I need to tell you about Allah or God. I don't remember which one he said, because Allah means God.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so here's the thing. I'm probably not going to be follow Islam after this, but I would actually really love to hear about your religion. So why don't you tell me about it? So it was really interesting. But prayer is more like a humbling practice that they do, and they do it 5 times a day towards Mecca. They also have larger services where they do prayers. It's more like, to my understanding, it's more like the reading of the text that you would see in a synagogue or something like that.
Okay.
But it's kind of just a reminder of their humility, or before God. And I don't know. I think that's a completely different usage of prayer than how Christians use it. They'll always say we humble ourselves before you, but what Christian was saying, do you really?
Yeah. Well, and then you say that, and then you ask for so much. You say, God heal. So many prayers of healing, or I'm just trying to think of some of just the most basic prayers. I feel like healing was if somebody's sick, you pray for them. If somebody went through a loss, you pray for comfort. If somebody, I'm trying to think of some other prayers, pray for food.
Yeah. Well, and then you can get into liturgical prayers too,
Right.
which I've never been a fan of liturgical prayers. We had some of those at College of the Ozarks because they were pretty old school Presbyterian, even though they accepted all denominations, but they were pretty like all of their practices were basically Presbyterian. So we did the whole sitting and the standing and the hymns,
Yeah.
in different particular prayers. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I also am more a fan of certain more liturgical branches of Christianity than I am others.
Yeah.
Like one of my friends is an Episcopalian, and
Yeah. Hey, Episcopals are
she's
cool.
yeah, she shares a lot of views with me, theologically and socially.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
that makes me think of like, I have a lot of experience with liturgical prayers because I worked at Youth Front Lacine, and before it turned back into camp, like just like camp, it was. I'll just start over talking about this camp that I worked at. It was based more off of a monastery than it was based on camp, where it's like all hyped up. Like we had prayer 3 times a day, and it was based like kind of a lot of like Catholic ways because like it was based off a monastery. But, there was no denominational relation, though we did use the prayers from like the Catholic ordinary time, and because there's like the church calendar and everything. And I actually really loved the liturgical prayers because it was something that I knew I would be praying every day. And to me, the prayers were very beautiful and very humbling and helped me to like center myself around these words of like what I wanted in my life. Like certain prayers about like, God, where there is hurt, let me bring healing. God, where there is like, let me be an agent of your love. Like all these different things of like the person that I wanted to be. Those were the things often that we prayed in the liturgical prayers, at least that I had. And I loved that. And even though like, I prayed those same prayers for like 3 months, I think it did have an impact on me because like when you say the same things over yourself over and over again, and I guess like in that time, like ask God to make me into that kind of person, like I naturally started to become that kind of person because those prayers stuck in my mind and those words of really who I wanted to be. And so at least my experience like during that time at camp, which is probably people listening are probably like, what camp is that? Well, it's not the same anymore. They don't do that.
my question is still, it was and is still, did you make beer at that camp
No.
or did you not? Because, okay, monasteries make fantastic beer. I'm
Well,
sorry, go
everyone
on.
was underage, everyone except for the leaders. So, or some of the leaders.
Catholics give their kids wine when they're like 6, so I don't want to hear this. I was
Well, we did
underage
have some
nonsense.
Calvinists there, so
Oh, okay.
yeah,
That's
we had some
unfortunate.
arguments over predestination and all that. But I mean, so that was one of the most formative times in my life on my idea of prayer because I had never experienced that before. I guess that kind of like depth and richness that I experienced there, like to me, prayer was just like, it was something I didn't do a ton. I didn't really understand the worth and the value in. And just so I prayed for food, I prayed for like hard things that would come up, But that time really like formed a lot of my opinions about prayer. And I think really still does inform my opinion of what prayer is, even if there is no God. Like I still think prayer can be very valuable, even if you aren't praying to something, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like Buddhists, when I looked up the Buddhist prayer, you don't have to believe in anything spiritual to be a Buddhist. Well, okay, I say that. You don't have to believe in like a deity
Yeah.
to be Buddhist. And then what you consider spiritual or physical or whatever, it kind of comes down, I like personally in a philosophical sense, it just kind of comes down to where you place or like what you kind of ascribe to being spiritual or physical. But I did have to correct myself because the Buddhist prayer is kind of about aligning like energy centers in the body to
Yeah.
create peace. And they kind of think of it like trying to become
Yeah.
the Buddha, in like attaining that peace. And so their prayer is more about centering themselves.
Going through like the chakras,
And
the 7. Yeah.
yeah. They didn't say chakras. They actually specifically mentioned 3
Oh,
energy
okay.
centers. And
Yeah,
chakras, there's like
7,
7
I
or
think.
8 or something like that. So it's a little bit different, but it is kind of similar to that. But yeah, so that's kind of like a godless prayer, I guess. It's just like, yeah, like you could almost use like yoga in a sort of prayerful, meditative way. Not almost, people do use yoga in a prayerful, meditative way. I'm just gonna misspeak like all the time this morning.
It's early. I've had some caffeine, so I'm kind of awake.
Well, I don't like making absolutist statements, and a lot of times it's because I don't know something. But in this case, like I actually do know something, and if it's something that if it's something that I'm wrong about, it's because somebody told me wrong or something. Like I'm allowed to make truth claims about something that I've researched.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess as you've developed, and Christian, kind of shared where he has come to with the idea of prayer, I guess, where are you at now? And where, I guess, what are some of like maybe the important phases of like your understanding of it recently?
So I think that I probably should have thought more about this, knowing what the topic was going to be. But I think so you talked to me a while back about the idea of finding God within yourself. And like that kind of stuck with me. And I started thinking of prayer. Well, I saw kind of the harms of like traditional Christian prayer and how like it can really lead like especially to like ableism.
My gosh, yeah.
The way that it's used a lot is like it can be like, oh, there's something wrong with this person and we pray for God to heal them, and like those healing prayers, which you might argue are like a small percentage of Christians, but they're also a very influential sect of Christians, and they touch a lot of people's lives, and they tell a lot of people that their loved one was not healed because they didn't have enough faith, and just blame it on other people. And that is extremely harmful. Like I cannot like, I honestly can't understand treating other humans like that.
There's story after story.
But so I got, there's so many stories
of people not being healed. Yeah.
So I got, I got kind of disconnected from like Christian prayer as a whole because I kind of saw the logical end of it. And I started thinking of it more like something like what Christian was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, kind of checking his internal racism. To me, something like that is almost a form of prayer. Like when you catch yourself like doing something or thinking something that you think is negatively affecting people of color, like pausing for a moment and thinking about that, taking it apart and internalizing it and being uncomfortable for a little bit, and like, hey, maybe I am not a perfect person and I need to check this about myself and fix this. To me, that's kind of a more useful form of prayer, to just kind of like if you want to take that moment like all the way down and try to get spiritual about it and like connect with yourself about this. And like you said, like try to make yourself become the person that you want through like affirmations and meditation and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily pray all the time, but it kind of looks like that for me, where I just want internally to be the person that I want everybody to be, and try to create that world, at least in myself, so that I can be that to other people. Yeah. So yeah, it's very personal for me. Me and Ashley don't pray when we are about to eat. Yeah. We just eat. Ashley said, I should have asked Ashley because she prays all the time. But I think to her, it's more like just having somebody to talk to. Yeah. Like a kind of ongoing conversation.
Yeah, for sure. That's good.
So.
Yeah, I feel like I relate with some of that. I feel so special that something I said just like stuck with you, though it was something that was told to me about like finding God.
Yeah, dude, in my writings, I've like written a lot of things that were like I wrote them after you said something to me because I was like, oh, that's kind of sticking with me. I need to get this out and process this.
Yeah, I think for me, like that time at camp was very formative. I started to see prayer as a means of becoming the person that I wanted to be, but I don't want to even just say that I wanted to be, but like finding my identity and finding out who I am and then becoming that. Breaking down the walls of fear, breaking down the walls of like things that were holding me back from really finding who I am. Prayer was a means of breaking down those walls and finding myself. And so what that looked like whenever I was praying to God was like, God, like, give me the courage to do this, because this thing that I was wanting to do, I knew was part of like who I was and what I wanted to do, but I was too scared to do it. And so my prayers very much kind of centered around like God giving me the strength, the wisdom, the insight to be the person that I knew that I was, subconsciously, I guess, because at the time I didn't know who I was. But yeah, I still had a lot of those prayers of like, protect me in this situation, or like I believed in healings for a while, so I'd pray for people to be healed and like stuff like that. But I feel like for the most part my prayers were kind of what I experienced at the camp in that very deep and meaningful way. And so like prayer still had a lot of meaning to me. And then like kind of maybe go through college a little bit, there were times which I distinctly remember, because they're, I think, some of the most special times of prayer, I guess, that I had, was that I would go to, we called it the Butterfly Garden. It was on campus. It was just like a little section right outside the prayer chapel, which I would go to the prayer chapel too. But there was just all these trees with these leaves that looked like butterflies. So we called it the Butterfly Garden. And I would just walk around there because no one was ever usually there or close by. And I would just talk out loud just to God. And I would do that for like, I'd do it for like half an hour, 40, like I would be there for a while. And I always remember just having like any deep and meaningful experience, like those were some of the deepest that I had, I feel like. And so like processing back on what that meant, like, I don't know. I think it makes sense to me that like the divinity in us, if that's, what it is, if God exists or whatever, then like that makes sense that I would be talking to myself, talking to what is in me, and like letting that come out, and like and doing that verbally. Like there's just something very special to that. And so I think like my prayers kind of developed in that way. And then now I'm not sure. I don't pray much, except in the way that, like you said, like really like sitting and thinking on things, or like actually before I like stepped in to ask for a manager to talk to at Costco to like try to get a job, I started saying some of these statements about myself that I believe to be true of who I am, and just said those things over and over again of like, I am confident, I have value, I am worthy, and like just saying these different things of like who I believe that I am, even though I was terrified to go in. And like that to me is prayer, and that was very beneficial, because I was like speaking truth over myself whenever I was terrified, and it helped me.
That sounds way healthier than what I do when I walk into a situation like that. For me, it's like I go, it doesn't matter. And then it's kind of the motion of like pushing a boulder down a hill and just like turning away and not watching what happens. And I just...
Oh my gosh.
I feel like your version is probably more beneficial to the psyche.
Well, I did learn this from my life coaching, which was very, I don't want to say it was counseling, but to me it was very therapeutic. And so we actually had to come up with a list of I am statements of like things that we would speak over ourselves of who we believed we are. And so I was speaking those things over myself, and I need to revisit those I am statements, because it was very impactful to come up with those things and then to speak those things over myself.
Yeah. I think, so one of the more positive forms of like a public prayer that I probably should have mentioned while Christian was still on is, I have occasionally attended the Pastor Paul Wednesday morning.
Yeah. And he was like my life coaching dude. So this is awesome. Yeah. Shout out to you, Pastor Paul.
Right. Yeah, shout out to Pastor Paul on TikTok. He and so I don't always go because it's actually during my work. So when I can, I'll like listen to it. But there was one time that I was actually like participating a tiny bit in the chat because he was basically just doing affirmations, and he was like saying that what you hear all the time in the church is that you are worthless and nothing without God. And he was like, God says the exact opposite about you explicitly throughout the Bible. And also, I'm going to say the exact opposite about you here. And he just asked people to be like, take something that you like about yourself and then like make it way bigger. And just like affirm that about yourself and believe it about yourself. And then he had people like write it in the chat, and then when people did that, he would take what they said and then make it even bigger, and just like extremely healthy and non-judgmental, and also without expectation either. I don't know how he manages to do all of it.
He's incredible. Yeah.
And so it was just like, it almost made me cry while I was at work. I'm just like listening to these affirmations of people, and I'm like, yeah, this is very positive. This is a great example of like a positive prayer. Whether I believe like talking to a deity is something that I still do or not, like this is something that I can get behind for sure.
Absolutely. There's it's a strange experience, especially whenever, like, I think even for me there was some religious trauma surrounding that, because it's so heretical to speak kindness over yourself and to not say I'm a worthless, dirty, filthy rag, but to actually say I have inherent value, I have inherent worth, I'm worthy, I deserve good things. Like, just even saying I deserve good things is a heretical statement, but it's a true statement, and it's something that was hard for me to say, but like is an affirmation about myself that it has been so healthy and has given me such a more healthy view on myself and of life. And it's strange to me, though I have many theories on why I think the evangelical church would not make you say positive things about yourself. But to say just all of these damaging things that they call humility, but really is very toxic to yourself and to your self-image, like it ends up just like wearing on you and destroying your life. It did for me. Like, I thought for so long that I had no value, that there was nothing to me, that I was worth nothing. But somehow God wanted to use me, and that was where my value came from. But now, through some of those practices, I've had to break through some of that and realize that I do have value, and that it's okay for me to say that, and it's okay for me to believe that, because saying it is one thing, believing it is another. And I think through these prayers, or
there's definitely ways that I did not. Sorry,
I was just gonna say, like, through these prayers or self-affirmations, like, I was able to come to a much more healthy relationship with myself.
That's good. Yeah. I think I had a lot of like those thoughts and that kind of trauma, and I don't think that I really felt like okay with myself as a whole person until I kind of stopped praying and going to church for a while. Like, because that was just not a thing that affirmed the kind of person that I was, and it led to a lot of self-hate, and it just wasn't good. And this year really is the first time that I've really started to feel like who I am is good.
Yeah, it's sad to me that is the reality, is that so many, like, prayer was just another way to destroy your self-image so that the church could give it to you, to to break you down almost, and say that, like, you are worthless, so you need us, you need God, you need this, and we have the answer for you, we have the solution. And like, prayer was one of those ways that they instilled that into you, instilled that idea that you don't have any worth, and that idea that you are completely helpless without God, really without the church.
Yeah.
So
I think
that
that video
yeah.
that you posted yesterday about dehumanizing people, thinking of people as statistics or thoughts or numbers or just like categories, like we
Mm-hmm.
place them into a category of society and then that's just how we understand them. I think that prayer really does not help with that normally.
No.
Like you'll get the like the contrast of you see a homeless person and you say, "Oh, I'll pray for them."
Yeah.
Uh I don't want to like, crap on anybody's beliefs or whatever, but probably what would be better would be to give that person food.
I'll crap all over people who do that.
Yeah.
That's
It,
messed up. I
I
mean,
mean,
come
well,
on, like
there's some people who like
yeah,
use prayer in that way for like a big tragedy that they can't do anything about, and that makes them
sure.
feel better. And I'm like, whatever. I think that there's actual things that you can do, but also I'm not a classist, and some people are poor and they literally can't like
Yeah,
give money to a
for sure.
donation or something like that.
Yeah.
But like that doesn't do anything. Like what I
Yeah.
think that is like I think that what the Bible would affirm and what I would affirm and what I think people in general should just affirm is that we should just do something to help that person.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
if you're going strictly biblical, in the book of James, it quite literally says, if you see your brother hungry or cold and needing shelter or something, and you just say, go be well and do nothing for them, then like, I forget what condemnation it is, but it's wrong. Like,
yeah, exactly.
that is not okay. And like, you've done nothing for him. And that's exactly what we do with prayer all the time. And like that happens. It hurts so much, like, because now it's bringing up past memories of my life when I've gone through hard things. And sometimes it was comforting to know people were praying for me, but sometimes I really just needed someone to talk to, but nobody was there because
Yeah,
they were praying for me, but they weren't really there for me. And that like really
right.
sucks. And like that's like the difference between like I think prayer being used as this useful tool of like affirmations and like finding yourself, or even like aligning your desires and will with something that is good, like something greater than yourself, maybe aligning yourself with truth, like whatever that means. But then it's something just so toxic whenever it comes to like people actually have needs, and if you never do anything to meet their needs and you think you're doing something just because you're praying, like that is a problem, because
Yeah.
like some people genuinely believe that it does something, but story after story, including my own, it doesn't. And it just like sucks that has replaced actually doing things for people, especially people who have like immediate physical needs, instead of actually doing, like, you have people who have the ability to do something about it. Instead of actually lending a hand, they just pray and walk away.
Yeah, exactly. Like the homeless people in my area, because like I said earlier, I live in a cheap house, which means I live in a poor neighborhood, which means that I have seen things that are not good,
Yeah.
um, like like drive-by shootings and stuff.
Mm.
And I don't mind it because I live in a place where I very much see the harms that are caused in society, and I
Yeah.
don't blame the people around me for those things. But like we all generally give food to the homeless people around here. There's like a house that is on the corner, like around the corner from my house, that they let the homeless people like set up camp in their yard, and they give them food sometimes when they're able to, give them like coffee during the winter to help keep them warm, let them in sometimes, and they and we just like I don't normally see people without some sort of food, or like who haven't gotten food recently, and I try to give food to them too and just be part of that,
Mm-hmm.
because like I could just sit in here and pray for them, but the people around me are actually doing things to help them because they're all
Mm.
like the same people. Like we all
Yeah.
know who they are. They
Yeah.
stay in the same area because this is a place where we benefit them.
Yeah.
When I have food, I try to give it to them. One time, and this is just like a beautiful human thing. Like one time, when I worked at a restaurant, chef made a ton of extra bread, and he was like, "Hey, this bread is gonna go bad like in a couple of days, and we're closed for a couple of days. So take it home or give it to a homeless person." And I was like, "Okay, sweet. I know some people that could use this."
Yeah.
So it was kind of cold outside. I put it in my oven and warmed it up, and I put some blankets in the oven after that and warmed them up too. And then I brought it to one of the people at the intersection, and he immediately started like distributing the bread and the blankets to everybody because they're not selfish people normally. They like, I don't know, from what I've seen, they all share and they all try to make sure that everybody has enough to eat. And I would rather look like that kind of person than somebody who has everything. So I would rather not pray that I have everything, and I would rather be part of something that benefits people.
Dang, you're making me tear up. that is really beautiful, and that triggers so many thoughts of so many things we could talk about. Which actually I think, surprise, listeners, we're probably going to do a part 2, because I have a lot more thoughts, and I know Christian will have a lot more thoughts too. And so I'm going to write some things. Actually, I'm going to do it right now because I can cut this out. Give me just a second.
That's good. That actually reminds me of another prayer thing that I can talk about after you're done writing that down. It's very short, and then we can end. So yeah, this is like a pretty, what you said there made me think of, like you were like, you know, I have some thoughts. I'm going to write them down real quick to make sure that I don't forget. And that reminded me of a thing that I heard about prayer where somebody was saying like, oh, I remember who it was. It was actually when I was helping a congressperson who I wouldn't want into Congress anymore, but he was a nice guy. So I'm going to talk about the nice guy part of him.
Okay.
And he said, like, if you say that you're going to pray for somebody, don't wait. Like, just do it right there. Like, and obviously now we're talking about, like, don't pray for people. But I think that that's, like, if we even take that back another step, saying that you're going to pray for somebody can be just like a way of absolving yourself of responsibility, and then you don't even do the thing that wouldn't help anyway that that you said you were gonna do. Like it's like just a way of completely removing yourself from somebody else's humanity and their struggles.
And for the most part, people wink wink, not talking from personal experience, definitely, but like you forget. Like you say, oh, I'll pray for you, but let's say you say that to 4 people throughout the day. You get to the end of the day, I forgot who I was going to pray for, and so I just forget to pray for them. So then I've literally done nothing. If anything, I've lied because I told them I was going to, and then I didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will say, let me try to redeem that concept for just a second, because that's what we do here. Is there is something beneficial to being mindful of people and like praying for them in the sense of like bringing them into your mind, and like that sounds so heretical, but like willing good things on them. And then maybe that could also be a way through praying for somebody that you think of something you could do for them, and then or like instead of just forgetting about them and forgetting about their struggles, which could be easy as well. Like if you do pray for them later on, then you actually could bring them back into your mind. And maybe that does trigger you to go do something for them. Because maybe you pray about what you could do for them and then you think of something, so like I think there is a redeemable aspect to that. I think we have both seen it a lot for the most part in the harm side of things. But at least for myself, my previous self, and for others as well, like it could be used as a tool or a catalyst to doing something good for somebody.
I can see that for sure. I actually had been thinking about that because I talked to Mom on Sunday, which I talked to you a little bit about, but at the end she said, hey, me and Dad pray for you all the time. I don't know if you think that means anything anymore, but we do. Yeah. And it made me think. I just said thank you, and it just made me think, like, how much do I think that means? And I guess I kind of came to the conclusion that I hope that it means that, like, they still love me and they consider, like, they kind of consider the things that I'm going through and try to take it seriously, and they internalize those things. And, you know, so I guess it does mean something to me, whether I think that God is going to, like, swoop down from heaven and, like, turn something in my heart that makes me become an evangelical again or whatever.
Probably not.
That's probably not going to happen. But, like, the intentionality behind it, I think, means something to me. And so I'm not going to ask her to stop praying for me or something like that.
No, because honestly, like, for them to stop praying for us would mean they don't care anymore. And so, like,
and that's our parents' heart. Like, we just understand that they, like, when they do that, like, it's very genuine.
This whole conversation is very nuanced, and I think that is a part of it as well. But I also understand there are some people who are like, don't pray for me. Like, don't tell me you're praying for me. Don't pray for me.
And if somebody says that, I think, like, respect that about them. Like, don't go and violate their will, like, their autonomy, and go pray for them anyway.
And then don't tell them that you prayed for them. Like, it's just, come on. If you're at least if you're gonna break their wishes, which I don't recommend, don't tell them, because come on, really, like, it's stupid.
Or
anyway,
use the kind of prayer where you use the kind of self-reflection that me and Micah kind of talked about earlier. You know, do that self-reflecting behavior, the introspection, and it can be a prayer related to them that's not about them. Yeah,
or if you're with them, maybe you could write down some affirmations of who they are and speak that over them.
Yeah, or whatever. I mean, it always depends on, like, what they're going through or whatever. Like, I had a friend that kicked his mother-in-law out of the room when his wife was giving birth because she started praying because there was a complication and he was extremely stressed out anyway, and it has a lot of religious trauma, and he was like, hey, don't do that in front of me, because he's already stressed out, and, like, it wasn't helping, and she just kept doing it. So he kicked her out of the I don't know what is it called, a birthing room. There's a word for it, and I don't know what it's called.
The delivery room. The delivery room.
He kicked her out of the delivery room, and, like, to me, totally understandable.
Yeah.
Like, you knew that he wasn't religious, you prayed, and I understand that you're trying to do something, but he asked you not to. You kept doing it. Yeah, you're getting kicked out of the delivery room because that's not a situation where he needs that, like, over him. Like, if you think that you need to keep praying, leave the delivery room yourself and do it out in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Like,
boundaries.
Be respectful of other people and their boundaries.
Yeah, don't step on people's boundaries, which, that's another episode in the making right there.
Hey, there's a lot of things that we can talk about, but apparently we're talking about prayer again.
Yeah. So well, we'll see. We'll
it's
talk
tied
to Christian.
to it. Well, it's tied to a ton of theology. There's things that I thought about that I haven't even gotten into yet because it's not prayer in itself. It's like prayer as it relates to other theologies.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a very, very good episode. I mean, prayer is one of those things that maybe you don't think about all the time, like whenever you're in the church. But I think even out of the church, it's something important to think about. Just some of the things we talked about, like what prayer could mean now. If maybe you don't even want to call it prayer, maybe you want to call it mindfulness, meditation. That's mostly, honestly, what I call it. I just have been using prayer for the sake of the conversation. But like I said, language is arbitrary anyway, and so, like, if y'all understand what I'm talking about, then that's all that matters. So, sweet. Where can people find us? Christian already said where we could find him. Josiah, you're making some videos now. This is exciting.
Yeah, I made a comment that I was like, yeah, I should probably start making videos again. So I actually changed my TikTok handle because I felt like I wanted it to be more relevant to the things that I started talking about and thinking about. So I changed my TikTok handle to @somethingmatters because despite what I said earlier about nothing mattering, It's actually something that I try to affirm in my life, that things matter and people matter especially.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a rebellion against the kind of internal. I'm a contrarian to myself as well, because I will tell myself that nothing matters, and now I'm like, no, something matters. So yeah, that's my reason for my TikTok handle.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that's a good handle. So you can find Josiah there. He may or may not make more videos. He probably will. But
Probably.
you can find me at Pondering Together. I try to post, let's say 5 days a week, just because it's something I enjoy. Maybe I like hearing myself talk. No, it's really just it's just my way of processing life, honestly. But you can connect with us. You can, reach out to us. Let us know if there's something you want us to talk about or any questions that you have. Christian already mentioned that if you want to support us in any way so that we can invest more time into this, then there is a link in the description somewhere that you can support us financially. And you can also find our TikTok, which isn't super active at the moment just because of life's craziness, but the combined TikTok of Morning Ponderings at Morning Ponderings. So thank you all for listening today, and hope you all have a great day.
See you guys. Have a wonderful one.
Yeah, same. Bye.
Adios. Oh, okay. I thought you were just staring at us.
Oh, so I've been talking this whole time and you guys couldn't hear me?
No, we did for the most part, but just right then you got
How
muted.
did I get muted? That's really weird. Okay.
Okay, let's just try it again so I don't have to just cut all
Okay. Yeah.
everything. That's really funny. I was so confused. I was
I
like,
was like, is he like really trying to build the suspense? This is going a little long.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, listener. My name is wow. Sorry, let me.
There's only one of you.
Just one. Just as our only listener. No. Okay.
We have a live audience today. A live audience of one.
Yeah.
And a heckler.
Oh
No
boy.
less.
Oh boy.